I'm 64 years old now, and I've learned that sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones that feel selfish at the time. Back in 2001, when I was 38 and sitting in my accountant's office going over the paperwork for my late father's estate, my cousin Rachel, who's a family law attorney, pulled me aside and said something I'll never forget. "Margaret, if you ever get serious with anyone, think very carefully before you mention this inheritance. Money changes people in ways you can't predict." I remember feeling uncomfortable, like she was asking me to lie. 20 months later, I'd be thanking God I listened to her. Let me tell you how I got to that point, because the context matters. It always does. My father passed away in March of 2001 after a sudden heart attack. He was 71, still working part-time at the hardware store he'd owned for 40 years in Boise, Idaho. I was his only child. My mother had died when I was 23, so it had been just the two of us for a long time. Dad was careful with money, incredibly careful. He'd built that business from nothing, saved every penny he could, invested wisely in municipal bonds and blue-chip stocks. He lived modestly in the same small house he'd bought in 1965. When the estate settled in September of 2001, I inherited everything. The hardware store, which a regional chain wanted to buy for $340,000. His house, worth about $180,000. His investment portfolio, about $290,000. And his savings accounts, another $95,000. After taxes and estate fees, I walked away with just over $820,000. I was 38 years old, working as a middle school teacher in Portland, Oregon, making $42,000 a year. This inheritance was more money than I'd ever imagined having. It was terrifying and wonderful all at the same time. Rachel helped me set everything up properly. We created a separate account at a different bank from my regular checking. We put the money in a mix of index funds and bonds, conservative but growing. The account was in my name only, Margaret Ann Sullivan, my maiden name. I'd been divorced for 6 years at that point, from a brief marriage in my late 20s that taught me a lot about financial vulnerability. After everything was settled, Rachel and I went to dinner. She ordered a bottle of wine, and halfway through, she got serious. "Maggie, you're a wonderful person. You're kind. You're generous. You trust people. Those are beautiful qualities. But please, please be smart about this money. Don't tell casual dates. Don't tell people at work. Don't even tell serious boyfriends until you're absolutely certain about who they are." "Rachel, I'm not going to lie to someone I care about," I said. "I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to protect yourself. There's a difference between lying and being private about your finances. You don't owe anyone your bank statements on the third date." I thought she was being paranoid, but I agreed to be careful. For 2 years, I didn't date much. I was processing grief, adjusting to having financial security for the first time in my life. I bought a small condo in Portland, paying cash $165,000. I kept working because I loved teaching, but I had this cushion now, this safety net. It changed how I breathed. Then in October of 2003, I met Thomas Rivera at a friend's Halloween party. He was 42, recently moved to Portland from Phoenix for a job at a financial consulting firm. He was handsome, charming, had this warm laugh that made everyone around him relax. We talked for hours that night. He seemed stable, successful. He drove a nice Lexus, wore good clothes, talked about his career with confidence. We started dating seriously by December. Thomas was attentive, romantic. He'd show up at my school with coffee, plan thoughtful dates, remember little things I mentioned. My friends loved him. He seemed like the real deal. About 5 months in, we were getting serious. He started talking about our future together. One evening, we were at his apartment, which was a nice 2-bedroom in the Pearl District, and he casually mentioned his rent was $1,850 a month. "This place is killing me financially," he said. "Between this and my car payment and student loans, I'm basically living paycheck to paycheck. You're lucky you bought your condo. At least you're building equity." I nodded, not offering more information. I'd been careful never to mention how I'd bought it. When people assumed I had a mortgage, I didn't correct them. "How much is your mortgage payment?" he asked. "I have a good arrangement," I said vaguely. "The building fees are reasonable. He didn't push, and I felt relieved. But then his mother entered the picture. Sylvia Rivera came to visit in June of 2004. She was 68, recently widowed, and according to Thomas, struggling with the adjustment. She'd be staying with him for the summer, maybe longer. I should have seen that as a red flag. A 42-year-old man letting his mother move in indefinitely. But I was in love, and I made excuses. Sylvia was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She was polished, well-dressed, spoke with this cultivated elegance. But there was something calculating in her eyes. The first time Thomas brought her to my condo for dinner, she walked through slowly, examining everything like she was appraising it for auction. "This is a nice starter place," she said, not quite looking at me. "When you two get married, you'll need something bigger. A proper family home." "Mom, we're not even engaged yet," Thomas said, but he was smiling. "Not yet," she said, patting his hand. After that dinner, Sylvia started inserting herself into our relationship. She'd call Thomas when we were together, wanting to know where we were, what we were doing. She'd make comments about how I should be thinking about my future, about financial planning, about making sure I was set up properly. One afternoon, Thomas suggested we meet with a financial planner together. He said it casually, like it was just good planning for couples. "My mom knows this great guy in Phoenix who consults remotely. We could get our finances organized, plan for the future together. You know, make sure we're on the same page about money before we take the next step." Something in my stomach tightened. "I don't think I'm ready for that yet," I said. "Why not? We're serious, aren't we? Don't you want to plan our future?" "Of course I do. I just like to keep my finances private for now." He looked hurt. "Maggie, that makes it sound like you don't trust me." "It's not about trust. It's just how I am." He dropped it, but I could tell he was bothered. That night, I called Rachel. "Am I being paranoid?" I asked her. "He wants to meet with a financial planner together, and I feel uncomfortable." "Trust your gut, Maggie. You've only been dating 8 months. That's not paranoid, that's smart. And I don't like that his mother is so involved." "She's just traditional," I said, defending him. "Maybe. Or maybe she's controlling. Just be careful." Thomas proposed in September of 2004. It was romantic, everything I thought I wanted. He took me to Cannon Beach, got down on one knee at sunset, the whole thing. The ring was beautiful, probably more than he should have spent. I said yes. I was happy. I was in love. We set the wedding date for June of 2005, 9 months to plan. During that time, Sylvia took over. She had opinions about everything: the venue, the flowers, the guest list, the menu. Thomas kept saying she just wanted to help, that she'd lost his father and planning our wedding gave her purpose. I tried to be understanding. But then, 3 months before the wedding, Sylvia started talking about financial planning again. "Margaret, dear," she said one afternoon when she'd invited herself to my condo for tea, "I hope you don't think I'm overstepping, but have you and Thomas discussed how you'll handle money after the wedding?" "We've talked about it a bit," I said carefully, "because I think it's so important for couples to be transparent. My late husband and I had everything joint. It made things so much simpler. No yours and mine, just ours." I nodded, not committing to anything. "I hope you're planning to combine everything once you're married. It's only fair, don't you think? A true partnership." I felt my defenses rising. "We'll figure out what works for us." Her smile tightened. "Of course. I just worry that keeping secrets about money is starting a marriage on the wrong foot." "I'm not keeping secrets," I said evenly. "I'm just private about my finances." After she left, I felt shaken. I called Rachel again. "She's pushing hard about joint accounts," I told her, "and I feel like I'm being made to seem suspicious just for wanting privacy." "Maggie, have you told Thomas about the inheritance?" Rachel asked. "No. I told him I had some savings from years of teaching. That's all." "Good. Keep it that way until after the wedding at minimum. Actually, have you guys discussed a prenup?" "No." He said that would mean I didn't trust him. Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Maggie, I love you, so I'm going to be blunt. That's manipulative. A prenup protects both people. If he's refusing that conversation, that's a red flag." But I couldn't bring myself to push it. I was getting married in 3 months. The invitations were sent. My dress was fitted. I told myself Rachel was being overly cautious. We got married on June 11th, 2005. It was a beautiful ceremony, small, just family and close friends. Rachel was my maid of honor, and she whispered in my ear as I walked down the aisle. I hope I'm wrong about all of this, but I love you no matter what. For the first 2 months of marriage, everything seemed fine. Thomas moved into my condo since it was bigger than his apartment. We fell into a routine. I kept my separate account private. Thomas never asked about my bank statements, and I never offered. Then, in August, everything changed. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I'd just gotten home from summer school sessions when my phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Sullivan? A woman's voice said when I answered. This is she. This is Karen Winters from Cascade Wealth Management. I'm calling to verify some information for an account consolidation we're processing. My blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. We have a request to consolidate your account ending in 7,743 with a joint account for Thomas and Margaret Rivera. We just need to confirm your social security number and authorize the transfer. The room started tilting. I sat down hard on my couch. I never authorized any transfer, I said, my voice shaking. There was a pause. Ma'am, we have signed authorization forms here. They were submitted last week by Thomas Rivera, listing himself as your spouse with power of attorney for financial matters. I don't have power of attorney forms with my husband for my personal accounts. This is fraud. Another pause, longer this time. Let me put you on hold. I immediately called Rachel. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial. Rachel, someone is trying to access my inheritance account. She was at my condo within 40 minutes. We drove to the bank together. My actual bank, where my inheritance was held, confirmed that someone had attempted to access my account with forged power of attorney documents. The signatures looked like mine but weren't. They'd caught it because the account had extra security flags. Who submitted these documents? Rachel demanded. The bank manager checked. They were sent electronically by Thomas Rivera, claiming he was consolidating marital assets. He provided your marriage certificate as proof of relationship. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might throw up. We filed a police report immediately. Then Rachel and I went to a different attorney's office, someone she trusted who specialized in fraud cases. By the time I got home that evening, Thomas was there, cooking dinner like nothing was wrong. Hey, babe, he said cheerfully. I'm making pasta. Your favorite. I just stood in the doorway, my purse still on my shoulder. Rachel was behind me. Thomas looked up and saw her. His expression changed. The smile dropped. We need to talk, I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. About what? But I could see it in his face. He knew. Want to tell me about the account consolidation you tried to process? I asked. His face went from confused to guilty to defensive in about 3 seconds. Maggie, I can explain. You forged power of attorney documents, Rachel said flatly. That's a felony. I wasn't forging anything. I'm her husband. We're supposed to share everything. I was just trying to make our finances simpler, to plan for our future properly. By accessing accounts I never told you about? I asked. How did you even know about that account? He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing. Now it just looked manipulative. My mom did some research, he admitted. She has a friend who works in estate law. She looked up your father's probate records. They're public. We saw the inheritance amount, and I knew you must have that money somewhere, but you kept lying to me about it. I never lied, I said. I just didn't tell you about my private finances. Same thing, he shouted. We're married. We're supposed to be a team. A team doesn't forge documents, Rachel interjected. I was trying to protect us. Thomas turned to me, his eyes pleading. Maggie, that money should be ours. We could invest it better, use it to buy a real house, start a family. Instead, you're hoarding it like I'm some kind of criminal. You just committed a crime, I said quietly. You forged my signature to access my money. The next part happened fast. Sylvia showed up. Somehow, Thomas had texted her, and she was at my door within 20 minutes. Margaret, she said, pushing past me into my own home. Let's all calm down and discuss this like adults. There's nothing to discuss, Rachel said. Your son committed fraud. Sylvia's face hardened. If Margaret had been honest from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary. She's been deceiving Thomas since the day they met. What kind of wife hides nearly $1 million from her husband? The kind whose inheritance was earned by her father and left to her specifically, I said. The kind who learned in her first marriage not to mix finances until she's certain. You were testing him, Sylvia accused. This whole time, you were testing my son, setting him up to fail. No, Rachel said. She was protecting herself. And she was right to, because look what happened the second Thomas found out. He tried to steal it. We weren't stealing, Sylvia said, but her voice was less certain now. We were consolidating marital assets. That's completely legal in Oregon. Not when you forge documents, Rachel countered, and not when the assets were clearly separate property acquired before the marriage. Over the next week, I learned things about Thomas and Sylvia that made my skin crawl. The police investigation revealed that this wasn't their first attempt at something like this. Thomas had been married once before, briefly in his early 30s. That wife had received a settlement from a car accident, about $200,000. 6 months after they married, she noticed money missing from her account. She divorced him but never pressed charges because he'd convinced her it was a misunderstanding. Sylvia had been widowed not from a loving long marriage, but from a contentious relationship. Thomas's father had left most of his estate to charity, specifically excluding Sylvia for reasons the will didn't specify. She'd contested it and lost. They were a team, Thomas and his mother. They'd targeted me specifically. Sylvia had done research, found out about my father's death and the probate records. Thomas's move to Portland wasn't for a job at a consulting firm. It was contract work he'd sought out specifically to be in the same city as me. The mutual friend who'd introduced us at the Halloween party? Sylvia had befriended her first, asked who she knew that might be single and financially stable. I'd been a mark from the beginning. Sitting in my attorney's office, reading through the investigator's report, I felt physically ill. This man I'd loved, who I'd married, who I'd built a life with, had never been real. None of it had been real. Margaret, my attorney said gently, I know this is devastating, but you need to understand how lucky you are. If you had put his name on that account, if you'd told him about it before marriage, and he'd convinced you to make it joint, you could have lost everything. The forgery gave us grounds for criminal charges. Without that, it would have been a much harder fight. I filed for divorce that same week. I also pressed charges. Not just civil, but criminal. The district attorney was a woman in her 50s who told me she'd seen too many cases like mine. These financial predators rely on social pressure, she said, on making victims feel guilty for protecting themselves, on using marriage and love as weapons. I'm not letting this one go. The criminal case moved forward. Thomas's lawyer tried to negotiate. He wanted Thomas to plead to a misdemeanor, pay a fine, agree to the divorce. The DA refused. She wanted the felony conviction. The divorce was surprisingly quick because there were no real shared assets. Thomas tried to argue he deserved spousal support because he'd given up his consulting work to support our marriage. My lawyer brought in his tax returns showing he'd barely worked since we started dating. The judge was not sympathetic. The divorce was final by December 2005. 6 months after our wedding, Thomas got nothing. I kept my condo, my inheritance, everything. The prenup we never had didn't matter because we could prove fraud. The criminal trial took longer. Thomas's defense was that he'd believed marital assets were joint property in Oregon, that he'd made an honest mistake. The prosecutor destroyed that argument by showing the forged signatures, the fake power of attorney documents, the deliberate deception. In March of 2006, Thomas was convicted of identity theft and attempted fraud. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, though he served only 11 with good behavior. Sylvia was charged as an accessory but took a plea deal, probation, community service, and an agreement not to contact me ever again. My condo felt haunted after everything. It was still mine, still safe, but I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. I'd let someone into my home, into my life, and he'd been plotting against me the whole time. I sold it in 2007 and bought a small house in Selwood. I needed a fresh start. For several years, I didn't date at all. I focused on teaching, on my friends, on building a life that was entirely mine. I traveled during summers. I got a dog, a golden retriever I named Lucy. I learned to be content alone. I'm 64 now. I retired from teaching 2 years ago after 42 years in the classroom. I never remarried. I had a few relationships over the years, good ones, but I never felt the need to legally bind myself to anyone again. I learned that you can love someone deeply without giving them access to everything you own. My inheritance, carefully managed over the years, has grown to over $2 million. It's allowed me to retire comfortably, to help my nieces and nephews with college, to donate to causes I care about. I think about what would have happened if I'd told Thomas about it on our third date, or when he proposed, or on our wedding day. I would have lost it all. Rachel is still my best friend. She's retired now too, and we're planning to spend a month in Italy next spring. We laugh about how she was right to be paranoid, though she always says it wasn't paranoia, just wisdom. Thomas got out of prison in 2007. I looked him up once, maybe 10 years ago. He'd moved to Nevada, married again, divorced again. Some people never change. Sylvia died in 2019. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't send flowers. I felt nothing. I've told my story to exactly 5 people over the years. My 2 nieces when they each got engaged, a young teacher at my school who mentioned her boyfriend was pressuring her to combine their bank accounts, a woman I met at a financial planning seminar who was getting married for the second time, and now you. Here's what I want you to understand. Really understand. When I decided not to tell Thomas about my inheritance, it wasn't because I didn't love him. It was because I loved myself more. I loved the security my father had worked his whole life to give me. I loved my independence. I loved knowing that no matter what happened, I could take care of myself. That's not selfish. That's not being untrusting. That's being smart. If you inherit money, keep it separate. If you own property before marriage, keep it in your name. If someone pressures you to prove your love by making yourself financially vulnerable, that's not love asking. That's manipulation. Thomas used to say, I didn't trust him. He was absolutely right. I didn't fully trust him, and thank God I didn't, because he proved exactly why that caution was warranted. My instincts were trying to protect me, and I listened. Real love doesn't demand you make yourself vulnerable to prove yourself. Real partnership doesn't require you to risk everything you have just to make someone else feel secure. And real trust is earned slowly, maintained carefully, and yes, sometimes withdrawn when someone shows you who they really are. I saved myself by keeping one secret, just one, the right one. 23 years later, I'm sitting in a house I bought with money I protected, surrounded by things I chose, living a life I built on my own terms. I don't have a husband, but I have my peace. I don't have children, but I have my freedom. I don't have a partner, but I have my security. And I still have that first statement from my inheritance account from September 2001 framed in my office. Account holder, Margaret Ann Sullivan. Just my name, nobody else's. It reminds me every day that the most important person to protect is yourself. Everything else is a choice, not a requirement.